We all need gis, rash guards, and a bunch of gear to train jiu-jitsu. Here at RŌL Academy, we've been using Fuji Sports for a very, very long time, but more importantly, they've been sponsoring the RŌL Radio podcast for over a year at this point. Gary?
Yeah, I'm checking out the website right now. Anything you could possibly need, but the new stuff, this American Grappler stuff, is amazing. It's so slick looking. Rash guard shorts, really cool giant eagle on it. It is nice. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, they've got the Be a Menace Happy No Gi lineup. So as you're getting choked out, you're looking up at the nice smiley face emoji. Anything you could possibly need, you can find at fujisports.com.
You have questions, I have answers. I started a brand new podcast just recently that's available on all podcast platforms and YouTube. It's called Ask a Black Belt. Very simple. You drop me questions, I answer them. Very simple. 5-6 minutes. Gary, have you heard it?
I have heard it, and I really appreciate it. How do those questions get to you?
Well, listen, you can message me on Instagram. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. But you can also comment on any post that I make, and I try to genuinely answer the questions as fast as I can, and they get posted 3 times a week as it is right now.
Beautiful. Ask a Black Belt. Check it out on your favorite podcast platform. Welcome back, everyone. Before we get started, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. That ensures that we can continue bringing you the amazing guests and fantastic content like we have for you today. On this episode, we have another world champion and innovator in the world of jiu-jitsu, Victor Estima. Victor has achieved great heights in the world of jiu-jitsu, which is a true blessing considering that a bad experience very early on in his journey turned Victor off to jiu-jitsu for years. Listen as Victor describes that childhood experience, how and why he returned to jiu-jitsu, the evolution of jiu-jitsu training, defining what makes someone the best, the importance of inclusion and community, and the similarities and differences between himself and the other jiu-jitsu legend in his family, Victor's brother, Braulio Estima. Here's the RŌL Radio with world champion, instructor, business owner, and one of the creators of the Estima Lock, Victor Estima.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we are live. Gary, how are you?
I'm good. We have a fantastic guest today. We've talked to his sibling recently, and I think right out of the box, he's got a pretty interesting story for us about how this almost didn't happen today.
Professor, how are you? Victor Estima in the house. Good to see you here. I heard that you had to jump through things to get to this episode.
That's it. Hello, everyone. A pleasure to be here. It was a bit of a challenge. Yes, I moved to a new city. I'm in Lisbon now, and I got some unusual traffic, which made me get here just right on the time of our appointment. And then I had this remote control that one of my staff members gave to me, saying this will work, no problem. And then I clicked on the button. It was not I couldn't make that gate open for any reason. And I was like, man, I've got to be there on time. So basically I decided, okay, I'm going to park outside the condominium and I'm just going to jump over the gate. I'm hoping that nobody saw it and tried to communicate to the police and maybe I can have a knock on the door.
So,
you know,
other words, if police comes in mid the conversation, we know why.
We get them to join them, you know.
Well, I'm glad we're recording video too to see them drag you off. I think that'd be pretty funny.
Well, that's I'm glad you're here. Recently, we had the privilege to talk to your brother. Actually, what an amazing conversation! I know you two chit-chatted after our conversation. So I'm glad to you here. I'm glad that you're part of this conversation. But I'm always curious. Gary and I, we talked about this quite frequently. It's like we talked to the husband, and we need to bring the wife in. We talked to the brother. We need to bring the other brother in.
Mm-hmm.
The family dynamics always are interesting, especially when it comes to jiu-jitsu. How was your life with your brother on and off the mat, especially in the earlier stages of your life?
Well, this is quite a big one. I can totally understand when you discuss like the opposites, right? Or the other side of the story. You always make like the nice analogies and create the differences, right?
Yeah.
My brother and I, we always been very different. We had a lot of similarities in the way the things we like, and we're into similar things, but we have very different personalities. As a younger brother, there is about 4 years and a half between us. And growing up with a bigger, taller brother, by the way, he's like 10 centimeters taller as well as his older. At that time, it felt like he was a superhuman in everything he did. It was so hard to catch up with him. But I never thought that I was, as any younger brother, you never think you are, you just think you are equal. There's no differences, even though there is a gap of age. So everything Braulio did, I wanted to do it the same way or better. I always wanted to catch up with him in everything I did. So that was starting in life, that was always me hunting to my brother. And funny enough, they got to a point where, I was doing football a lot because he loved football. But I didn't understand the comparisons of perspective of his side. I just knew that I did football because my brother did football and I wanted to do more of it. But guess something interesting. He make me the keeper of his shooting practice. So what he wanted to do is to score goals. So he wanted to practice his shoots, his shots on me. And something happened on the background. I was a younger brother and I'm much younger and smaller, but then I could take the hit of my brother much older and stronger. And which, funny enough, it led me to become part of a football team as a kid. I was called into a trial because they saw me playing around, and I made it to the main team of football in my state without never even practiced football. I was just called in to be a keeper. And because I had no fear, I could take hard shots, even when I was 6 years old. I got chosen when I was 6. So I could take heavy shots from 10 and 11 years old. I would jump, no fear. And that was because Braulio kept kicking hard on me. So since the beginning, he pushed me a lot to become, consciously and unconsciously, to push me to the next stage. And I felt like I benefited a lot by having him as a older reference, because Braulio, he's always been, he's trying new things. He's pushing himself. He's always he experiments a lot. He moves forward. He thinks out of the box a lot. So I always had this brother who kept doing different things and trying new things. And because of his age, he was able to bring a filter down to me. He was able to deliver his experiences in a way I understand and I trust. So that was a very interesting brotherly dynamics that I had with him, which benefited me a lot. And as we can discuss later in the future, it also challenged me and made who I am today. So I think I have a lot of great things to say about our relationship.
You mentioned there are some big differences between you two as far as the personality are concerned. What are the, one or two, the biggest ones that really separate you, that puts you on the opposite sides?
Yeah, my brother, he likes to live the moment. He's a charismatic individual. He's a free spirit kind of person, which I admire that on him. But personally, I am much more conservative. I like to take time on things. I like to plan a little more. I like to analyze all the steps. I try to be a bit more in a controlled environment, which benefit me in some areas of my life, and he benefits from other areas. So we're kind of opposites on that side. And my brother is more of a quieter guy. I don't like to be in that middle of attention as much. My brother is very natural at that. He's very, internally I call him a clown, he's always making fun of everything. But he makes everybody smile. He's got this part of him. And I grew up with that. I never really had to try to make other people laugh, to laugh myself. I just laughed at him. And he always had this dynamic. I'm happy to be and leaving Braulio shining. I am happy to leave him on the shine moments. And I never really craved that. So I kind of stayed back. And it really worked for us in this kind of dynamic. between us.
Yeah, it's great to hear that you guys have such a strong relationship established, and all throughout the life, even to this day. Especially as life become so busy and challenging. The last, especially couple days, it seems like you two have a very strong relationship as brothers. Am I sensing that correctly?
100%. I think that number one, we have very strong family values. We came to this world as two brothers initially from same mother, same father. Life blessed us with the three other brothers nowadays from different areas from my father, but originally it was only us. And then being together was a mission. It was like something that we are the two brothers against the world. We were always thought that way. Number one, we had a lot of respect to each other, even though growing up we always had our moments as brothers, but nobody could mess with neither of us. We were very protective of each other. And because of only us, it created this bond. We also felt very responsible for our mother. And we, by being together, we took ownership of supporting the family, and we felt like we're doing this together, changing our lives. So we bonded a lot on these ideas that we're going to go to the world to change our reality. And through Jiu-Jitsu, we continue our relationship, because life has a tendency to put people apart when they're growing differently. But Jiu-Jitsu kept us close. From the teenage years when things could go in different directions, Jiu-Jitsu kept bringing us back. Nowadays, life is very different to me than it is to his life. But the reason why we connect is because of Jiu-Jitsu. My personality is very different to his. The things I like to do sometimes are the same, but we do it differently with different people. But Jiu-Jitsu brings us back together. And we always nurture this relationship, which is pretty good.
Well, I wanted to ask, I saw an interview with you a while back where you were saying that as a teenager, your father and your brother were like, you need to do something out. We need to get you an activity, right? You need to get involved in something. And you were like, I'll do whatever you want except for jiu-jitsu. And that's amazing. It's wonderful how it did turn out. But how did they drag you into it? Or how did they get you to do the thing that you said you'd never do?
Yeah, this is a funny one because it's part of the challenges that I had growing up, being a younger brother to a potential superstar in Jiu-Jitsu, right? At that time, everything was about what my older brother was doing. And as a younger person in the house, I lose priority, right? And so the focus was about how good Braulio was doing. So I felt like I wanted somewhere that it doesn't relate to him, so I can do my own. I can be free to be myself. One of the negative sides of being that same brother in the same sport is that comparison that you don't really appreciate, because there are unfair comparisons. We are different individuals with different talents and live in different times with different competitions. But that pressure of being a younger brother of an accomplished person, it was always very hard. So since teenage years, that comparison was always there. So I wanted something completely different. But then I didn't have that thing. And the funny thing is, I did the same things my brother did. I did judo when I was 6 years old. I was competing in judo. I did football. My brother did football. Everything he did, I did. And I did skateboarding a little bit. He did. He did surfing more because he was older. I was skateboarding. I love surfing. He likes surf. I don't surf because in Recife there is sharks. So when he was a teenager, he could surf in the area. When I became a teenager, there was no surf for me because there was too many sharks. But anyway, it became that time where I very quickly recognized this, but I didn't understand how can I leverage this. So that was my first statement. And I decided to do music. So I was playing a lot of guitar and I was doing all right at guitar. I was playing in a band in a church I used to be part of. So I was learning fast. I was becoming good at guitar. I even taught some guitar lessons for some younger kids than me for a little bit of cash. And that was the thing I felt like I was going to do. But I was becoming sedentary. I was not very athletic. And that was the thing that defined me in the past. I was very athletic. And so the concern from my father, my brother, that I was becoming a sedentary teenager, that I'm missing out on the growth spurts of my teenage years, and that was very valued in our home to be outdoors and doing sports. So they all convinced me that I had to, for sure, start out, some level of sport. And I said, okay, anything but jiu-jitsu. Because I didn't want to be, just because Braulio does that doesn't mean I have to do it. That was my first resistance.
It's
then
like
I did volleyball.
It's like you wanted your identity. Is that right? Like we talked to Marcio Gomez, and he talked about, his son, and even though he's a pioneer of jiu-jitsu, like he kind of disappeared because of the success of,
right. He's Hajar's dad now.
Right.
Instead of,
you know what I mean? So he said, like, literally you kind of even disappear because of the success that Hajar had. Is that something, is that what you're talking about? Because of the success that your brother had, you wanted to do your own thing. You didn't want to do the same thing. You didn't want to be compared.
Yeah. In my case, because he was not successful yet, but he was successful in my family.
Yeah.
He was having the attention. He was winning titles in my area. So everybody was talking about how well Braulio was doing at jiu-jitsu. It became an overwhelming thing. And I wanted to have my own definition. I didn't want to be the younger brother of, the person who just does, but Braulio is the guy and Victor just does it. I want to have my own identity. I felt that kind of pressure, but I didn't understand as well. I can tell you now.
Right.
At that time, that wasn't my feeling. Everything's about Braulio. I want to do my own thing. But now I understand it's because of the achievements that he was getting. He was getting attention because he was the first son, and then he's doing well at his thing, and everybody wants to praise him. But I felt that kind of pressure. And that's basically, I feel that was my response. But then I'm not a person very stubborn in that way. When people can tell me that it's a benefit into something, I will do it. But I want to do it in my terms, not on somebody else's terms. So I tried volleyball, handball, and then none of those things really take for me. I did judo before. I like wrestling around. I like grappling, but I never really understood that I could do something. So Braulio came back, Pan American champion, the first gold medal in my whole state in Brazil in all sports. My brother was the first one. So he got a lot of hype. And then I thought, oh, wow, my brother is truly doing something special. And then I humbled down to the idea that he is in a great path. And maybe I might try jiu-jitsu again because, it could be something good for me. Maybe it's in the genes. Maybe it's in the genetic code that he does well. I can do it well too, So there we go. I tried jiu-jitsu again. And
do you think that was the motivator for you to do jiu-jitsu, or do you think it was more of a kind of push in the right direction?
Push in the right direction. A push in the right direction, because I always did judo, competed, and I always been that way, but I was too young. And
how old are you talking? How old were you?
When I was doing judo, I was 6, and I did it again when I was 8, when my teacher passed away. My brother probably mentioned that. I was a judo teacher from school, had an accident, he passed away, so we all stopped. I came back again at age 11, did a little bit of judo again, and that was when Braulio started to transition to jiu-jitsu. I tried jiu-jitsu at 11 years old, but I have to say the environment where I was training was not suitable for kids, because I spent 2 hours of my first session tied up in the middle of the pole of the mats, because Braulio used to beat people up in the gym, and they wanted to get back at me by tying me up for 2 hours.
Wait a minute.
Older brothers, right? I got hung on a hook once at a party.
Rewind.
Do that.
Right. Yes.
The students of the area got annoyed with Braulio.
Okay.
Because Braulio used to beat them up. And then they got me tied up in the middle of the pole. And then because as a punishment and make me a tougher kid or something.
Right.
And that kind of traumatized me. I never came back. And that links to how I do things today for the new generation, which we can link later. I believe jiu-jitsu is a tool which everybody should have a chance to do it properly. And many of them, people might have stopped jiu-jitsu many years ago because they were not included. So inclusion and treating people properly is very important to us. So that was a bit an eye-opener for me to know now as an adult what happened then. It's kind of crazy times. But then I stopped. It put me off. And that's probably became a little hurdle as well when coming back to jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. But then my brother reassured me that there was enough another 15 years old kids training. So then okay then.
So at what age do you come back? How old are you when you actually, at 11, this event takes place, which puts you off, kind of creates that separation. I don't want to do this for many reasons, right? How old are you when you're coming back, when your mind changes
15.
actually?
15.
So
years old.
4 years later.
Yeah.
It takes you 4 years to sort it out in your head. You becoming at this point a young adult, right? 15, you getting into this maturity level, you can comprehend things differently. What is different in your mind that encourages you to try jiu-jitsu once again?
It was a combination of the success my brother had in tournaments. Potentially I could do something with my life, like I could have a path. We were in a city where those things doesn't happen to people like us. Being like this, having success in sports is not something that we can even dream, to be honest. Mm-hmm. It's something so, I like the idea that it gave me confidence. I was actually being bullied a little bit at that time with my mates at the school, another school, sorry, in the street that I used to live in. The older guys used to come over trying to give me physical. And then I was like, I didn't know how to stand up for myself. And I felt a bit, worried. I was not strong. I was not big. I didn't know how to handle the situation. That motivated me when I started. I could say, okay, now I can build confidence to protect myself at age 15. I can follow the footsteps of my brother. He's accomplished something. And then I can be physical again. They've become the person who I always thought I should be. But at that time, I was just getting to know what's out there, It gave me a channel, where I could put all my energy to.
Are you thinking that jiu-jitsu at that time, when you're 15, are you thinking that jiu-jitsu could be your profession in the future?
At the age 15, seeing profession was too far. But when I started training, I saw the results and I started to compete and I started to find results in competition. I saw a successful path for myself. But it was all childlike mentality. I won a state championships. Yes, I'm doing good at something. I had 2 fights. It was not a major achievement, but it felt a huge accomplishment for somebody like me because I always thought, I'm just me. I don't win anything. I win something. So it's great. So I felt it built a lot of confidence that I could do things. And I saw as well my body changing at the same time as a young male. You feel you're getting a bit stronger. You're getting more respected in your environment. People look different like you. And they see that you are training pretty hard and they kind of become like a bit more less willing to engage in a confrontation with you when they know that you can do things. So it kind of made me feel safe.
Talk about that.
That was the first element.
Talk about the very first day when you returned. And this is why I'm asking this. Jiu-Jitsu is a contact sport. Sometimes we get hurt. Sometimes life takes us in the directions where we need to take a break. And 4 years is a long break from Jiu-Jitsu. But sometimes people take 6 months break for whatever reason it is. And returning back, it's extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. Walk us through what was in your head the first day when you're coming back onto the mat. Some of these memories, do they come back? Do you put them aside? You don't care? What's emotionally happening with you?
Number one, the hurdle was I was not very well treated at Jiu-Jitsu in my first time around. And I was reassured by my brother the environment changed. There's other kids similar age to me because before they're all older kids and they're all trying to prove a point, and probably there was no structure, there was no methods. It's just like a bunch of kids together. So, and then when I got that first time, I was afraid and worried that something's gonna happen again. But then I recognized that the mat changed, they got bigger, they were a bit more professional. There was more kids in my age and even younger than me training. So he reassured me that was okay. my first session, I trained with Professor Otávio Souza. That was my first training partner, my first sparring. And my first sparring day, my first session, first sparring, he got a number on me and popped my arm. That was the moment then. And then as a competitor that I always have been, he's younger, he got my arm, I'm coming back again for tomorrow. I'm coming back again to get him back. That was the thing. And I already knew what it needed to be done. I need to train a lot. And I knew that I need to train at least 3 hours a day. I was doing double sessions from the very first day. There was no walk through things. There was no like an easy pace in. It was like all in. Because I knew Braulio was doing that to train and compete. So I went, all right, I'll double session just like my brother, because he does it, I can. So I just kept turning back, and that's how we begun.
What a beautiful return.
Yeah. Well, starting out that way, was there any potential for burnout? Or was that never a question? Were you like 2 sessions a day and I'm going to keep doing this, and you fell in love with it? And then it went on to 3, and 2 hours went to 8, where you were there every day, all day. Or was there a point in that where you were like, maybe I'm biting off more than I can chew?
No, I think because I was so young and I so wanted to take on the world in my head, I do as far as I can. So you don't think about being tired. You just think, I'll get stronger and fitter, and then I will keep getting better and better and better. I train and I listen to my body. When I was tired, I wanted to stay in bed. And, when you feel the body, you have a break. I felt a lot of pressure from my coaches to come back training and go heavy. And I had to kind of manage the expectations of my coaches sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I had to do a lot all the time. And I don't think they understood as well, peaking in particular times, or there was no understanding of that. It was just a hardworking environment. And I had to rephrase just to give you reflection on where we were at that time. Recife is a Texas-like environment, like cowboys, and not in the city, but more in the countrysides. But there's a beach there. But we are not the most affluent area. Every person I know there is hardworking. They pride themselves on their ability to go physically, and it's like a tough environment, and everybody's tough. They got a very strong mindset, and very hard to put them off, to make them feel fear, or they have fear, but they go anyway. So that was a little bit how it used to be. So we were trained to push hard. And that was the differentiation between other schools in the country. At that time, being physical and prepared and hungry and having willingness to do things sometimes overtook the strategic technical approaches of many players in Rio de Janeiro, where the technique and knowledge was all there. And there was a difference between people in Rio, they have life a little easier. People, they have a bit more money than we have on our side. Everything's so hard for us. Some of the guys like too much of a good life, beach style, and we just work. So that I felt like it added a lot of value to me in hunger, willingness to have a very rough and tough environment, because I could see the contrast between other regions, and I fed from how deep I can dig, how far I can dig in order to train. And that really benefited me later in my career, recognizing that relentless training is not smart. But I didn't know then.
Sure.
I got injured in my back, but I never had major injuries, but I pushed through a lot without guidance. So some of the lower back injuries I have today came from that training with bigger opponents and training partners when I was only 17, 16 years old, getting stacked at a young age by men. And that caused some damage in my back. And looking back, that was not safe, but I didn't know any different. And it was what it was.
Would you agree with the just general statement that Jiu-Jitsu has changed over last 10, 20 years? I mean, since you talk about 15, 17, 18, whatever, however old were you at that point, we've gotten much smarter as far as the training is concerned. right? I mean, I started 20 plus years ago, and here in the US, and there was no such thing as training light. There was no, it just, nobody really cared. And we didn't have the guidance to really do any of this. And I can imagine, you talk about similar things way back in Brazil. It was just hard, harsh grind every single day. And it was almost like fight for survival, if you will. You had to win to get to the next day. But that creates a lot of wear and tear, right? I mean,
Mhm.
a lot of pressure on the body, physical pressure. And over time, if you do this for 20 years, then you get to 40s like I am, and then getting out of bed is sometimes hard, and
Yeah. I relate to this. I think it changed massively, Thomas.
Yeah.
I think being in Brazil at that time, you just forget country. For the early stages of jiu-jitsu development, that's basically what it was.
Yes.
I think it happens now with the understanding I see and I have across the countries here in Europe. It still happens in countries where jiu-jitsu hasn't been there for very long. You can see the stages happening, like exactly how it happened in Brazil a few years ago. And it happened in the UK when I arrived in the UK, because we taught that mentality of hard work. And then later we had to understand to be more professional. We merge with education, and we basically, you can train, you can create methods for training, you can create strategy on how you develop. You have now, as a competitor, you have strength and conditioning, you have somebody who works on flexibility, a flexibility specialist, and then you have nutrition, and then you have like psychological support, and it's so much more that we become more professional athletes, the more we develop. But when in jiu-jitsu is an environment where there is lack of experience and lack of positive influences, because sometimes you can be in an environment, even in the United States, jiu-jitsu is well developed, but if you have a leader in that region that doesn't have proper training, didn't do the proper guidelines for professional development, you will see those things happening again. I think that when jiu-jitsu now has a lot more opportunities to be more professional, so there's a lot more energy, education going into making a great athlete. So every jiu-jitsu player competing nowadays is an athlete. Before, they're just players. I still remember world championships in 2004-5. People would win because they were talented and they never really prepared. They just happened to be there on the day, a few weeks ago, going out partying, and you would go and win a world title because there was the technical ability is so much higher than the physical talent, at that time.
Do you think that's possible today?
No.
So there's more than just talent.
Now, it is not possible to just rely on talent. No way. No way. The competition is so well trained physically, and they're prepared to grind, and they're all very technical. There's no black belt competing today that is poorly technically. They're all elite technically, and they're all elite athletes. So when you put them together, it's hard to compete against, because if you're not putting the time and energy to prepare as a whole, you're going to fall in one side. Maybe a technical person can do really well for a while, but then the overwhelming pressure of a good cardio will keep coming in, but the technique is good enough to keep hitting back against the other player. It's very hard. I still feel, though, that some people who are so talented, they require less physical attributes to win. But that means they have to be physical too.
But then there's the flips. Let me challenge you on this, because this is actually a very interesting topic. Is it possible to be less talented and win because you have some of those physical attributes, or maybe your strategy is much better than your opponents?
Number one, I think it's a very hard thing to do, defining the best. I can go into this conversation with you guys. Defining the best is only the person who wins that tournament that day.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how we define the best? It means the person who wins the tournament that day, he competes against a different crew, they might not win.
Absolutely.
Right? So delivering the jiu-jitsu in this high level you might find one person who are able to bring their game in such a strategy, but they're not necessarily the most talented or physical, but they have a great game for that particular sequence.
Mm-hmm.
He might become the champion, but doesn't give you longevity on the same path, right? You can't keep going just hitting the same. It becomes a one-off.
Right. It's too many variables, essentially, right? Too many changes.
Too many variables,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So remaining at the top, you need to have an all-around balance, of your attributes. You gotta have good. I can see, for example, we can see players nowadays that are highly physical. They are very agile, very coordinated, and they have a very small game, and they win. And they win tournaments. But because they are very good at implementing their A game, and they're so good at it, they overcome many others. But then you see those exactly the same fighters competing against a different person that is not necessarily as good or won as much, but creates a cut. He puts them in a place where it's a completely off position for them, and they get tapped out of nowhere. Boom! How is that possible? So again, Jiu-Jitsu is hard to create a rule and a definition for what is the best. I think to be all-around athlete is the key to put your higher percentage for winning. So you have a smart strategy game, and so you can have your physical to implement your thoughts. So you got a great strategy, you got a great physical to implement your thoughts. Because it's a very interesting part where you can see people who knows the technique, but their physical doesn't allow them to implement their thoughts. They get tired quicker. When you get tired, you don't think as much. You're not as sharp. And you think about things, but you can't do it because it takes too much energy, even the smallest thing. So strength conditioning and physical elements are a facilitator to implement thoughts. So, but if the thoughts are not the correct thoughts, doesn't matter what you have behind you, what engine you have behind you, you will fail, right? You need to have technical knowledge and train a lot of jiu-jitsu to be able to implement great thoughts. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it always would be important to be really technical or strategic within the game, right? You got to be that niche. You got to know how to win. And then you have to have a cardio and a tank to implement your thoughts. The more cardio you have, the better you are implementing your thoughts.
So let me ask you this. If you had to define the best, what does that mean to you? How would you define this? Because we a moment ago, we just agreed that winning a gold medal is just essentially states that you were the best at this particular time within this region with this particular group of people. So if this doesn't make you the best all the way on the top, what does?
Yeah, this is funny because we have a definition of the best who wins a match in a particular set of rules. Mm-hmm. But that rules was defined by some level of criteria. Mm-hmm. But Jiu-Jitsu is, for example, beyond winning that match. It's beyond, like, you can define the best player is the one who can implement some basic level techniques at a speed, or somebody who has a broader understanding of the game that can share and give people jiu-jitsu games that suits them best and can guide development. Mm-hmm. Is jiu-jitsu only value on your ability to win a match? Or is jiu-jitsu is valuable on your ability to share and inspire people to learn and go through the journey of jiu-jitsu?
What do you think?
For me, you're talking about trying to measure an infinite mindset with a finite mindset, right? So it's an infinite game with a finite mindset. So finding the best, you're defining something that is not really real for everyone. There's people in different realities and think different. You go, this guy, Bushesh is the best, but Roger is better like this. And it's going to be a matter of opinion, right? And for me, I believe in a contribution, right? I think the best values is not necessarily somebody who is the best, but I think the mentality that we that I value in an individual that makes a person all around is somebody who is able to contribute.
Well, and I think you're touching on something really, really important, right? Because you said somebody who can win, that's one side, but somebody who can contribute, that's a very different side, which means now we are breaching into this, and Gary and I talk about this all the time and on the show. It's being a good competitor does not make you a phenomenal instructor, right? Those two are kind of separate. They bleed, but they are separated, right? There could be a phenomenal jiu-jitsu player who let's just say IBJJF, they compete, they win, right? But are they able to teach? Are they able to take this knowledge that they have and relate the knowledge to another student or group of students? Can they motivate these students to compete in a similar way as they have in the past, right? All these dynamics now become
That's
very
amazing.
blurry, right?
100%. Like one rule that I have about this, a competitor has a selfish mindset.
Yes, 100%.
And a teacher and a good coach has a selfless mindset.
Yes.
They are contradicted. They're going directions completely different. They merge, they begin in one way and they have to relate, but they are completely different things. And that's why when you ask me and you state the best competitor, the best, I have a hard time to value only the medal. Because the best, I saw many people who are the best implementator of the rules with a more limited jiu-jitsu knowledge. I've seen lots of that. And I saw a lot of knowledge in jiu-jitsu that didn't have the attention to follow a set of rules, particularly to win on the edges, and they are less valued in a tournament. And I don't think that is another comparison. It's so hard. That's why I always go back into value contribution. How much do you add value to jiu-jitsu? I think you add value to jiu-jitsu by your style, your mentality on the mat, what you're trying to accomplish, and what you set for when you step on the mat. That's more important than just winning. What you do every day for jiu-jitsu when you're not competing, that defines your qualities. And again, we're never going to find the best. You're going to find great approaches that are contributing and adding value in different ways. And who wins really the best of jiu-jitsu is the jiu-jitsu community.
I mean, that's beautiful. I mean, this is just brilliant what you're mentioning right now.
And I wanted to ask you, so throughout your competition career, especially when it was at its highest levels, you were also teaching. And a lot of people don't do that. You just a moment ago said that they might cross paths for a minute, but they're opposed. How did that teaching throughout that competition life, do you feel at this point, did it make you a better competitor? Or do you think maybe you could have gone further as just a competitor had you been spending that time just on yourself?
It's a very good question, Gary. I think I did this because of necessity, which is to teach a lot, to be able to fund my dreams. But while I was doing it for necessity, I realized that became one of my biggest assets. I spent a lot of time on the mats. I thought about jiu-jitsu all day. And when you train, you don't train only your body, you train your mind. And you acquire a deeper knowledge by sharing. You almost like you reinforce your own knowledge and you question your own knowledge every time you share. And you have the habit of doing this every day, multiple times. It can be a part of teaching that can damage your preparation because you're spending too much time teaching stops you from doing your own training. But when you're able to find a balance where you do your own training and you find time teaching as an add-on to your mind training, and then you don't lose, you just gain knowledge and experience. I think every athlete that are thinking of competing at the highest level should always consider sharing for maybe the reasons they want the results and the understanding, the performance, because they have more knowledge to implement that. So that means more knowledge, and you have the physical and the training. Your training allows your thoughts to be real.
But that has to be hard. I mean, there has to be, because I'm just looking, forget about jiu-jitsu for a second, but like if we look at any other professional sport, you know, wrestling or basketball or any other professional sport, there's not one coach who plays professionally at the same time. And you mentioned this just a moment ago. Competitors are very self-centered for a reason. They have to be. They have to train their mind, their body. They have to be focused. They have to be sharp any given time. And by stepping into this coaching role, now we care more about the other people. So something is a give and take. Something has to sacrifice in order for us to be good at something else. It's just, this is part of life.
Yeah, so I totally understand.
So balancing this, it has to be very difficult.
I do agree with that, Thomas. Let me just put this thought in your head, in your guys' head, just for you to understand my point of view. Mm-hmm. You are, in order to become an athlete, you need to be prepared in everything, right? And you had to teach and train because it's a necessity. So when it's a necessity, have no choice. You got to do it, even if you're struggling. That breeds a very specific mindset. You got to have a grit, because you got to take what it takes, do what it has to do to get your dreams. Mm-hmm. So teaching is part of it, and also makes me better. I will do it, and I'm not going to complain. It is hard, but guess what? That's what we're used to, overcome hard things. Mm-hmm. So that breeds the mentality of a champion mindset. You know, you're also focused on sharing and giving. You know, it's not only about taking. You exercise a different type of player. You can see, you have empathy, you have kindness. You don't think the world is around you. Sometimes we can see nowadays that a lot of great players, they become very arrogant because there's something missing. There's something, a purpose needs to be in line for them. And when you see Jiu-Jitsu does bigger things to people than just performance. And then you start to fall in love with the mission of sharing. And it adds value to your personal, your emotions, your spirit, and also adds value to your teaching, to your competition and your performance. But I do agree that is needed, a coach. But teaching Jiu-Jitsu is different than being a coach. So you have the ability to share technique only a specialist can do. Somebody who knows how to implement. Jiu-Jitsu is too complex. You need someone who truly understands the intricacies of the legs, the angles, the timing, because they have lived, they have trained, and they've felt it, they understand it well enough. They don't need to be athletes, but need to have the experience. They have to have done Jiu-Jitsu for a long time. But being a coach, it's a very different thing. You can see being a coach, somebody who analyzes a match and created a set of techniques or directions that a fighter, a competitor can implement with the techniques taught by a technician. You know, that is the teaching and that is the coach. Two things. If you're going to go into a basketball player, you're going to see the guys who knows the techniques. Is that one coaching. But to play as a team and to coordinate the strategies is another coach. The strength and conditioning guy is another coach. Mm-hmm. It's sometimes, because Jiu-Jitsu is still so amateur, we only have one person does it all. Mm-hmm. And that's where it gets merged. That's why we perform. It's a lot about individual talent. It's a lot about, where you train, who inspires you, and still very early stages. But one day, we should have a coach and a Jiu-Jitsu technician working together, preparing athletes with strength and conditioning and all the elements that make you a super athlete. And that changed the game, and that will make the best athletes in the world when you have that platform. And that's going to be a new game, a new world.
Yeah,
But right now we're still living a different time.
and I think it's going in that direction. If we look back 20 years ago, right, and we talked about this just half hour ago, perhaps, life was very different. We trained very different way. We have educated ourselves over this period of time. We are smarter, and I can only imagine what's going to happen in the next 10 years or next 20 years, next 35 years. Probably, we might not be on the mat at that time, or maybe we're going to be in a wheelchair or little crutches, right? But I'm hoping that the evolution of the sport will go in a direction where we are by far smarter. Jiu-Jitsu will turn in a little bit more professional approach where there is a compensation where people can really, really live off of that as is happening in other sports. But that also mean that we're going to have to get other people involved, people who are very smart in nutrition, very smart in physical attributes, very, whether it's recovery or preparation, whatever the case is, and then have specialists and specialist techniques to really get these athletes to the point where they can perform at the best and the highest levels ever, just like we see in any other sport, right?
And you need funding. You need money. You need the sports to grow, offer more opportunities for all those professionals. And that is a path we're taking. It's going to take some time, but you can go into this, probably this view that will be the perfect goal to become in the future versus where we are and what makes somebody do well. And that is still in discussion, how to pave that pathway for a professional career in Jiu-Jitsu. And then you can talk about the Jiu-Jitsu competition and careers, and there's so much more than just athletes and teaching. That is so many different developments that we are starting to look now. That Jiu-Jitsu, for many years, we're like, okay, I compete, then I go back to do a normal job because I compete all my life. I'm a world champion, but there's no opportunities in Jiu-Jitsu. And now, you could say you can go be a competitor if you want to, and that is you can manage your own school, you can develop your own business, you can open multiple projects. Now it's a world of Jiu-Jitsu. People got awakened to Jiu-Jitsu. Now Jiu-Jitsu is growing everywhere globally, and it's a lot of opportunities for those who are specialists. So that is a pathway that way as well, right? But there is another time that it still doesn't happen, that athletes can be athletes. You still have to finish your career as an athlete, and then what do you do? Mm-hmm. Right? And that is still like such a difficult moment for many athletes. They spend all that time, they become great athletes, and what are they going to do when they are no longer at the prime? Right. Have they earned enough money to create a safe path for their families? Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably not. Even the highest paid ones, they are not there yet. So that's one of the things it makes a huge difference when you understand a career pathway inside Jiu-Jitsu, right? And they branch out not just as athletes, but it goes into many different roles. And I think that I know of the work we do here in Estima, and I can see many avenues that is still not yet done in a daily, in a everywhere, still not part of the everyday. Mm-hmm. But it's going in a very interesting path, multiple opportunities, not just as an athlete and teacher, as Jiu-Jitsu is going to become something much bigger.
Well, and I think there's one more thing that we didn't even touch upon. I mean, we talked about a lot of competition and professional areas of Jiu-Jitsu, but there's also just Jiu-Jitsu as a hobby for a lot of people who have no interest being professionals. If we look back 10, 20 years ago, as somebody who is 50 years old, was unlikely to join Jiu-Jitsu, right? It was an unsafe environment for them. And today, thankfully to these organizations and these platforms that we have, and such as your academy and Gracie Baja and many others, there is a safe platform for guys to join who don't have to be the highest athletic level. They don't have to be the smartest out there. They don't have to be grinding 6 hours a day. They can come, they can learn Jiu-Jitsu, they can stimulate their minds and get to know this beautiful lifestyle on and off the mat. Am I going in the right direction here?
Perfect that, Thomas. I think, again, when you understand the past, you know how things used to be, and you know what things can become. So if you're going to define jiu-jitsu only for the athletes, you're not fulfilling the potential of jiu-jitsu can do. We only did competitions 20 years ago because that's the only way jiu-jitsu was done.
Right.
There's no other way.
Right.
And then what happened was we learned from our lessons. A lot of people train jiu-jitsu and they quit after a while because they cannot stand the training, because they are not able to do the same training routine as the athletes, competitors that are competing at the World Championship. So, and that's where was the biggest challenge for jiu-jitsu. And what Gracie Barra, it was like the first force of changing that reality. Because you could have done jiu-jitsu for ages, you're a great asset, jiu-jitsu is incredible, but then there was no continuity.
Right.
So jiu-jitsu was dying in a particular age. People would not practice anymore. So that was compromising the development of the sport. And because the competition took such a high priority in most schools, it was making like very hostile for an average person to train. And the people who are leading jiu-jitsu never really understood the value of jiu-jitsu if it's not for becoming the toughest guy in the room. It was very about proving yourself. So one of the things that helped me evolve a lot was what Gracie Barra taught me internally, that jiu-jitsu is much bigger than just a tournament. You can't define a tournament as what jiu-jitsu can be, because jiu-jitsu is the daily routine of training, is the bonds and friendship we build. Jiu-jitsu is the integrity we have to become the best we can be. Having to be a good person, to be somebody who helps. You see people take jiu-jitsu to overcome life challenges. And if you limit the experience to only people who are already strong and fit and want to take over the world, you are missing out, and you're allowing jiu-jitsu to stop helping people who needs.
Right.
If you think about who are the people who need jiu-jitsu the most, is the vulnerable person, the less confident person, the person that doesn't have physical attributes. They need jiu-jitsu to reassure themselves the same way I did when I was 15 years old. And jiu-jitsu helped me, and I grew in jiu-jitsu with all the benefits. And jiu-jitsu gave me so much, friends for life, lifestyle, health environment, being confident, going after my dreams, my goals, don't bow down, keep going forward. When you get knocked down, come back again. When you're uncomfortable, we find a breather. All those little things we are taught in the environment of jiu-jitsu was being limited to very few. And when Gracie Barra became talking about the jiu-jitsu for everyone mentality, is because we had this mission, the mission of helping people through jiu-jitsu.
Well, that was going to be my next... I'm sorry. That was going to be my next question, though, is, that slogan of jiu-jitsu for everyone. What does that mean? Because we've asked some people from the generation before you, oftentimes, is jiu-jitsu for everyone? And we get different answers. Some of them flat out say no. But now at where jiu-jitsu is in its own history, is jiu-jitsu for everyone?
I 100% believe that the jiu-jitsu is for everyone. But when you define jiu-jitsu for everyone, you're not defining a person who cannot even enter the room, right? Somebody with such a disability that they are not able to move or enter safely in the environment of training. When we talk about for everyone, is that if you are a little boy or a little girl, you can train and you can have a program and methods that help you develop in jiu-jitsu. If you are a teenager, you have a method and a program for you. If you're a female, you have a method and a program for you. If you're older, younger, there is a training program and a method for you. You don't feel left out. You don't feel like you have to do what few guys are doing in order to practice jiu-jitsu. So doesn't matter your gender, doesn't matter your physical ability, doesn't matter your sexuality, it doesn't matter your race, it doesn't matter your religion. you're welcome in a jiu-jitsu environment. And that is jiu-jitsu for everyone definition. And that's what a lot of people misunderstand, because I know everyone can be, all people in the world can go and train jiu-jitsu. There will be limitations. There will be exceptions, like every rule there's exceptions. But we are willing to work hard to make sure that that person is having the right experience to continue to develop and find jiu-jitsu as a tool to help themselves. That is the mission. So I truly believe in this, and this is the mission, because I began trying to become a competitor, become the best competitor I could be, and I realized I was in a journey of self-development, of becoming the best person I can be.
Yeah. Speaking of that, let me take us back to the beginning of our conversation. You said something, and I wrote that down. You said the moment when you were 11 years old, it turned you off from that environment, from that room. But you also said that that moment shaped you to who you are today and how things are being approached, how you approach training others, and how you share the journey of jiu-jitsu. Let's bridge back to that. How did it change, and what you do different because of that event to make jiu-jitsu as beautiful as it is?
100%. Every time I'm leading our team of professors and coaches for our kids program in the academies that I'm involved, number one, we create the priorities. That is what we want from that program, right? Do we want just teach them jiu-jitsu? Is that the only reason why they're here? Every parent, when they bring their kid, they're looking for something else. They're looking to help their kids to develop, to become better people. That is the mission of every parent. And if we only think becoming the best competitor is the only way to become a better person, we are not in the right mindset. So number one, we're trying to develop great future citizens of this world. And we're trying to shape them by giving them confidence, teach them tools to overcome challenges, working on teaching them discipline, cooperation, becoming a good friend and a brother, to become somebody who appreciates the environment and the things they have. They're not spoiled. We teach them through jiu-jitsu, getting them to love the idea of sports and training and learning the art of building confidence, coordination. And while they're interested in this journey, we are inspiring them to become a better person. And that is the priority. And the reason why I didn't want to train, because I was mistreated by the students, because there was no guidelines, there was no purpose behind, there was no mission behind. And the lack of all that could have either taken me to a great path or a very wrong path. Or I could never turn to jiu-jitsu ever again. That was that close. I only came back because of a lot of convincing from my brother and family. And there was nothing else out there in my town to get me. If it would be something else, I probably would have done it more than jiu-jitsu at that time. So how many kids have stopped benefiting from jiu-jitsu because they were not included?
Oh, I agree 100% with you. How many adults stop?
Yeah, I'm not even going to go there.
Right. How many adults stop because their experience is not what it should be? And I'm not talking about being rolling red carpets and being all beautiful, but there are situations that occur that create a negative experience. And because of those, people don't come back. And not only they don't come back, but they create a very negative view about jiu-jitsu, which is, in my opinion, very untrue. Right. So we have a huge responsibility as instructors, as business owners, as staff, however we are involved, even as training partners, to go above and beyond for those who come in for very first time and step on the mat for very first time, to make sure that experience is exceptional. It's beautiful, and they can take that positive view and really continue doing this for many years.
100%. So it's about inclusion, right, Thomas and Gary? It's about inclusion. People, in the end of the day, they want to be part of something.
Mm-hmm.
And when they begin, they are starting Jiu-Jitsu because they want to learn something, but they want to get into something. They want to be connected to a crew, to learn, to push each other, to have support. People stop training when the environment that is not suitable for them. The training levels are not the right training levels for the standard. And they are not feeling they be supported. There's no follow-ups. There's no showing them the path. Mm-hmm. But the most important one is the moral value that is in that school. Think about this, guys.
Yeah.
Who are the people who has the highlight of every academy? Right. Some schools, they highlight only the champs. And they exclude any normal human that are in that school. Mm-hmm. So you have the students who has to, you're the champion, or you're not even part of that crew. You have to be a tough guy to be even included. There are a lot of gyms like this, a lot of schools like that. And the other schools, though, they're the most valuable moral level is cooperation, support, right? You appreciate the people who are the biggest support of the school more than you appreciate the high level champions. The high level champions are important too, guys. Don't get me wrong. They are inspiring, and they are very important to people to keep people a dream and to show the efficiency of the art and the elite that it can go, but it's usually unachievable for most people. And what makes a great school is being in a cooperative environment where people relate, they share, they're free, and they're included. And people call them by their first name.
That's a big one. That's a big one. There's so many schools out there.
Not nicknames, mm-hmm. Their name.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. 100%. Listen, before we wrap this up today, end of each episode, and this is something new that we just started doing just a handful this year, actually. A person who was sitting in your seat in the previous episode asked a question, not knowing that they are asking you. So it's kind of a tricky situation, but they did ask a question, and Gary is gonna read you that question out, and we would appreciate you answering that question, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and some of these will be deep, some of them won't. I think this is more of one of the funnier ones. And Aaron Hurley asked, "What is the most embarrassing thing that has happened to you while training?"
Embarrassing thing.
The most embarrassing thing. I've got mine. I know what mine is.
That is a tricky one. I'm trying to remember being embarrassed.
Well, let's spin it the other way. What was the hardest thing during training? What was the most challenging thing during training?
Well, during training, the hardest thing, it was management of my ego.
Oh, nice. Oh, I have a feeling this could go very deep, but can you elaborate?
The hardest is, I know this is when I unleashed that, when I managed my ego, that's when I truly develop as a competitor. Somebody with a high ego, they're always going to the A games. They're always doing the things they always doing something like, for example, I'm a guard player and every time I train, I pull guard, or, they always do the things they always do because they're always trying to get the best results in training. And they are afraid to expose in areas they are not experts. And they feel the respect and their value is being compromised if they get tapped by lower grades, and if they are, losing training.
Yeah.
And so that was the hardest thing I had to do, because I always had a lot of pressure. Being a teacher very young, I always thought I had to win every training because otherwise I'll lose my respect as being a coach, especially when I was a coach too young and too early stages of my belt. And when I managed to master that mentality, I'm all open. I have tapped quick. I have got taps quick. It doesn't define me. And then I can manage that my ego will not be hurt by getting tapped multiple times in a row. I started to explore my jiu-jitsu further, and I achieved much bigger breakthroughs and helped me develop and truly become all around in my game. And until today, I don't care. I try not to just tap like this, but I'm willing to go into the depths of my game without the fear of the consequences of getting caught.
Would you say that putting yourself in these vulnerable positions allowed you to explore areas of jiu-jitsu that you've never found prior to that?
Yes, 100%. One thing, just simple. I had a great guard at purple belt level and brown belt level, and I very rarely got my guard passed in training. But when I used to be overwhelmed and a bit tired, that would lead me to get my back under pressure. And my back, I never really liked I never really spent too much time doing the back because that's a place where I had never really controlled very well because I never explored as much. And I would get tapped in tournament. The two times I tapped as a purple belt, it was from a clock choke from third position. The same tournament. Final of the absolute, quarterfinals of my division. Same move. That was like a hole in my game because I never experienced being there under heavy training. And that was the last time, because I learned this became my lesson. I got to go everywhere as a purple belt. So I started training back defense all the time. And that means tap out a lot. And that is one of the things that happened to me regarding, when I overcame this, I was able to defend my back multiple times in tournaments and in training. And it became a place where I could explore all the techniques that put me angles close to my back, but not necessarily they have my back. Actually, I have the edge because I truly understand the matrix that I've been exposed so much there. So that's one. And I'm still trying to think about the embarrassing thing. Apart from the trumps that you do sometimes in the wrong time by squeezing a position, you're going for an armbar and then you go, or the guy is pressuring you and you want to look like you're not even trying. And then suddenly you go, it's like, oh man, I put a lot of strength here.
That's
probably something like that. I don't.
It does happen to all of us
at
some point or another.
Yep.
But listen, I said this last week to our previous guest, but the worst part about this show is that it has to come to the end at some point. Despite these amazing conversations, amazing stories. And I do want to thank you for being here today. Thank you for jumping over the fence. Thank you for doing going above and beyond to be here. But more importantly, thank you for your time. And really thank you for the deep knowledge and thoughts that you've shared over the last 70 minutes or so. That will be greatly appreciated by everybody who's listening.
No, my pleasure. I'd like to say again, guys, thank you for the opportunity to share this conversation with you guys. Since my brother came on the show, he told me it was a great conversation, and I feel it was exactly what he said. You guys are very easy to talk to, very knowledgeable about, the jiu-jitsu world, and I feel so happy to see people like you guys, putting a light into the jiu-jitsu lessons and what happens in the jiu-jitsu. It just makes our sport even more special. And thank you for having me here.
Oh, thank you for the kind words.
We thank you for the kind words, and we do appreciate all the support.
Mm-hmm.
Let's wrap this up for today. Thanks again, and we will see you.
Hold on.
What?
You forgot. How can people get in touch with you
Oh,
if they
yes.
want to find you? Where's the best way to find you?
Nice one, guys. You can find me on Instagram. This is the usual way. Victor Estima GB. This is me here. I try to keep some basic level of content out there, and I sharing my lifestyle and what I do in Jiu-Jitsu. And that's it, guys. Or you can come to any Gracie Barra school, or you're going to be here in Portugal. I'll be around here. We have, of course, the Gracie Barra online platform that you can access instructions on and everything over that too. That's where you can find things we do.
Great.
Beautiful.
All right.
Are we good to wrap it up now?
Yes, I'm sorry, sir. It's hard being a partner with your professor. Like there's these lines where I'm afraid to cross, but sometimes I got to step in.
We do appreciate you being here. Thanks for sharing everything, and we'll see you on the mat.
Peace.
Hey guys, thank you. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.